Welcome to another session of readings from Oconomowaukee, featuring Books and Company from Oconomowoc and Boswell Book Company from Milwaukee. I'm Daniel from Boswell.
And I'm Lisa from Books and Company. And I will then move on to introducing Jessica, Anya Blau today. Jessica was born in Boston and raised in Southern California, so she's got both coasts under her belt. She has written 6 novels. Her newest, Mary Jane, sent both Daniel and my bookseller, Tony, to read more of her books. So Tony's just finished The Trouble with Lexi and loved it. And Daniel's currently reading The Wonder Bread Summer. So maybe he'll talk a bit about that too. Jessica's novels have been featured on the Today Show, Good Morning America, and NPR, and other national publications. Jessica she also writes short stories, essays, and co-wrote the script for the movie Love on the Run. She has taught writing at Johns Hopkins University and the Fashion Institute of Technology, which I'm going to ask about too. So she's currently living in New York City. Welcome today, Jessica. We're so thrilled to have you. We all love the book so much. And that quote from Nick Hornby is amazing. So why don't you start, if you don't mind, giving us a little sort of elevator pitch about the book, and then perhaps reading a section. A short section.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for reading the book, and thank you for liking it. That's just the nicest thing. Thank you. So this book, I mean, there's 2 things that sort of preceded this book. One, I also ghostwrite, and I was ghostwriting for a celebrity, and and it was just kind of a nutty, and she was married to a celebrity, and she grew up in a celebrity household, and it was and she had no boundaries, which I'm used to because I'm from Southern California, and that was all good. And we were spending time together in New York and in Los Angeles, and we were reading all her diaries, and she's super smart and she writes incredibly well. And these diaries were really beautifully written and just filled. There were like 40 of them. And we were reading them together, and we'd been working together, and we were doing dramatic readings one night. And we were reading them, and I said, you should just edit these diaries and publish them. And 2 days later, I was fired. And so I was so upset. And, and she said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to write this book myself, and I'm going to use my diaries. And I thought, okay. So in the meantime, I turned down teaching jobs, and I was, and I was just like hurt. And, because it was like, you get into that thing when you're ghostwriting with somebody, you're very, she used to FaceTime from under a sheet with her husband in bed at night. And, you get really close. So the firing is it's like a breakup, and it's like, and it's the humiliation of being fired. So it was terrible. And I was like really upset. And I turned down teaching because I needed to work intensely with her. And so I just thought, I just sat at the computer, and I thought, I'm just going to write what I want to write. Because also when you ghostwrite, the hard thing is you have to write what somebody else wants to write. And like you want to, and you have to say it the way they'd say it. And and they want to tell some story, and you're thinking, that's kind of a boring story. And that's part of your job, is like, nobody wants to hear that. But it's, it's hard to tell somebody that they're telling you a boring story, and it's really like, there's all this sort of stuff that you're negotiating. You just can't sit down and write. And so I just thought, the freedom to just sit down and write. And so I sat down, and there was a book in my head that I'd been wanting to write for a while, which was that I had been at a party, and I met a woman who had told me that she was a summer nanny in the mid 1970s for a psychiatrist who had housed a famous rock star and his movie star wife. And she was in some really not glamorous town. It wasn't Baltimore. And she was in this very not glamorous town, the last place you would ever expect to see a celebrity. And they were there all summer long, and nobody in town ever knew. And so of course I had just 10,000 questions for her. Like, what did they wear? And what did they smell like? I mean, I kind of wanted to like tie her to a plank and make her answer every question I had. Like, what did they eat? What was in the closet? She couldn't remember any. She's like, I don't know. I was like, well, did you have dinner together? She's like, I don't know, probably. I was like, well, did you go through their clothes? I don't think so. Well, did you hear them? I don't, they were just there. I was working and they were there. And I thought, it's just, to me, it's like, that would have been the dream summer. So the book is sort of like somebody, to me, I mean, she's a lovely woman, this woman, but all I could see was like lost opportunity. Like, it was almost like, you failed at this summer. You were like handed the greatest possible summer of your life. And I mean, obviously she didn't really fail, but in my eyes, she failed. So I thought, well, I'm going to do that one over. And I'm going to do it the way it would be for me. So sorry, I think there's like a helicopter going by. So I got fired. I was heartbroken. I wanted to write, and I just sat down. I thought, okay, I'm writing that story. And I had lived in Baltimore for many years. As you said, I taught at Johns Hopkins and I went to graduate school there. So I thought Baltimore would be a good place to put it in the mid 70s, because Baltimore's, to me, coming from California, it's such a beautiful and wonderful and strange city. And there's so many strange things. And historically, it's so complicated. And, and so there's all this good, great and bad stuff about it. So, and it seemed like far enough from New York that you'd have somebody would check in for the summer. And it also has Johns Hopkins and Shepherd Pratt, these two psychiatric institute. Hopkins has a psychiatric institute and Shepherd Pratt. So it has these two places where you'd have a doctor sort of prestigious enough that a celebrity would go to him. So anyway, that's where it all started. That's how I sat down and began the book.
That's kind of an amazing story too, to just have that nugget and have all those questions.
Oh, and questions unanswered. I mean, as I said, she was a lovely woman, but it was like that. I just couldn't believe it, that somehow it was all sort of just happened. And it's almost like it didn't interest her that much. Whereas to me, it was like a fascinating setup.
Milwaukee has a history of leaving the celebrities alone. And I think, maybe she bought into that. We were talking about how Giannis can go to, in Milwaukee, he goes to Walgreens, in his neighborhood, in his suburb, and nobody bothers him. And you just think what that would be like in Los Angeles.
Right. Yeah.
Mobbed. Would you like to read a couple pages, do you think?
Sure, I'll read it. So just a little.
I'm not being rude, but I want to make sure the phone stuff is off, because I thought I turned everything off and I'm hearing beeps and things. So I'm here and listening.
Okay, my phone stuff's off. I think, is it, you're not hearing beeps from me, right? Just, you're implicating yourself. All right. So for people who haven't looked at the book, it's 1975 in Baltimore, Maryland. And Mary Jane is a 14-year-old she goes to church and she goes to the country club, and she's just this lovely, she's a good girl. And she gets a job as the summer nanny for the Cohn family. And in 1975, it's in a neighborhood called Roland Park that was actually developed in real life by the Olmsted brothers, who built Central Park in New York City. And it's this beautiful neighborhood in Baltimore, but in the 70s, Jews weren't allowed in the neighborhood. And so the Cohns are Jewish, and they're sort of one of the first Jewish families in the neighborhood. And her mother doesn't know this. She's sort of, her family's a little conservative. So, and her mother thinks he's a doctor, but he's a psychiatrist. So she doesn't even really understand what Mary Jane, she just thinks Mary Jane has a very respectable job working for a doctor down the street for the summer. So Mary Jane, this is her first day on the job, and she's with Dr. Cohn and Izzy, her 5-year-old charge, and the celebrities haven't shown up yet. So the celebrities will move into the house by chapter 2, I think. I can't really quite remember. So Mary Jane's there, and they're in the kitchen at the banquet. And Izzy's 5. So this is Izzy. What should we color? Izzy was sorting through a 6-inch stack high of coloring books. Is there a nurse in there? I asked Dr. Cohn, nodding toward the window. He had told her that his office is in the converted garage. A nurse? Who helps you with the patients? Dr. Cohn laughed. I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a medical doctor, but I just work with thoughts, addictions, obsessions. I don't deal in bodies. Oh, I wondered if my mother thought psychiatrists were as big a deal as the doctors who dealt in bodies. Bodies, Izzy said, and waved a coloring book in front of me. The human body was printed on the front. That looks cool. I gathered crayons from around the table and grouped them according to color. Let's do the penis. Izzy opened the book and started flipping through the pages. My face burned and I felt a little shaky. What color are you going to do the penis? Dr. Cohn asked, and I almost gasped. I'd never heard an adult say penis. I'd barely heard people my age say penis. The Kellogg twins were the 2 top students in our class, and they never said words like penis. Green! Izzy stopped at a page that showed a penis and scrotum, The whole thing looked droopy and boneless. The scrotum reminded me of half-rotted guavas that had started to wrinkle as they shrunk. Words were printed on the side and lines directed each word to what it was naming. This penis was larger and far more detailed than the one I'd barely glanced at on the anatomy drawing we'd been handed in sex ed class last year. In fact, upon receiving that handout, most girls took a pen and rapidly scratched over the penis so they wouldn't have to look at it. I was too afraid of the teacher to graffiti my paper. Sally Beaton, who sat beside me and was afraid of no one, saw my pristine page and reached from her desk to mine to scribble out the penis. Izzy picked up a green crayon and started frantically coloring the penis green. I wasn't sure if I should color with her or not. If it hadn't been a penis, I would have. But it was a penis, and Dr. Cohn was right there. Would he want a girl who colored a penis taking care of his daughter? Then again, his own daughter was coloring a penis, and I had to assume he or Mrs. Cohn had bought her the book. Help me. Izzy handed me a red crayon. I nervously started coloring the tip. Dr. Cohn glanced over. Jesus, it looks like it's pissing blood. I froze. It felt like my heart had stopped. So that's her first day on the job.
You've talked a little about the origin of this, like the story that you got. Where did you, how did you place, like, how did you decide place and time, like in terms of setting? I know you had lived in Baltimore for a time, and you've talked a little bit about that, but why did you choose 1975?
Well, the woman who told me the story, she was in the mid 70s, but there's also, you know, as the story, I mean, I should admit, I don't think things through. I think you all both already know that I'm a little ADD, but I don't think things through so much. It's more like when I write, it's like I have an idea. I always have a character and a sort of central situation or emotion. Like in Wonder Bread's Summer, that opening scene, I was actually remembering that from real life, you know, and so it was just like, you know.
We'll talk about that.
So, you know, so I would just usually have like this central idea and I know who it's happening to. And then it's almost like I'm in some strange dream state and there's a movie running in my head and I'm writing down the movie when I see it. So this was just naturally, I mean, I did think, oh, 76, I don't want to do 76 because the bicentennial and I don't want to deal with all that stuff. And I thought 75 is good. And it would be about the first year that they let Jewish people into Roland Park, that neighborhood. And so it was sort of like that. And then that opening scene, most of my books, whatever the opening scene is, it wasn't where I actually started the book, except for actually Wonder Bread Summer I did. But, you know, or it's been revised 1,000 times. You know, I have books where I rewrite the book from beginning to end, from first person to third person to, you know, beginning to end, you know, truly you can go on my computer and there'll be 20 drafts. I mean, it just gets rewritten and rewritten and rewritten. In Mary Jane, that opening scene was pretty much how I wrote it. And what happened is I sat down and I had her go in the house. And as soon as she went in the house, I knew what that house was going to look like. And essentially it looks like my childhood house. And so we lived in a very sort of conservative, tidy neighborhood where everyone had a gardener but us. And so everybody had these beautiful sort of sculpted lawns with, you know, shrubbery and stuff. And then we had these weeds, you know, up to your knees. And, you know, I mean, it was sort of chaos. And, you know, and our steps were like this narrow and you had to, you know, walk with one foot in front of the other because there was so much stuff lining the steps. And so I essentially had her walk into my childhood house. And then as soon as she walked into my childhood house, I knew that her house was going to be like my best friend's house growing up. And they were lovely people. They were wonderful and they weren't racist and they weren't conservative, but the house was clean and tidy and organized like that. And they had a menu on the refrigerator that her mother wrote out, my best friend, and she was a twin, that her mother wrote out that had the menu for the entire month on it, you know, and so she went shopping, I think on Sunday for the whole week. And it always had a main, 2 sides and a dessert. And every time I went over there, even though I did it, you know, I was there every single day, I would just take the magnet off and I would take out that menu and I just loved reading it. It was like meatloaf, you know, iceberg, lettuce wedge, green beans, Jello. Like, and she had this beautiful, like really legible square hand. Both of my parents wrote as if they were like falling asleep on the paper, you know, and she had this wonderful, perfect handwriting. And, you know, and so when Mary Jane walked into that house, I knew what she would go home to. So it sort of like progresses like that. And then when Mrs. Cohn walks in and you can kind of, you know, she's wearing a sheer blouse, it was like you know, all the mothers in my neighborhood growing up, they were just these, you know, lovely women, and they had these beautiful helmets of hair and headbands and stuff. And my mother had this long hair, and she didn't shave her armpits, and she didn't wear a bra, and she didn't wear underwear, and she barely wore shoes. And her toenails were always painted like red glitter nail polish, you know, and there was like a marijuana orchard in the backyard. I mean, it was just like, it was like this, you know, it was like the Addams family, a different version of the Addams family. So I understood internally, you know, this sort of out of place family house. And I understood Mary Jane's house because, you know, that was all my friends' houses, you know, where I spent time and had meals. And I used to go to church with my friends. And, you know, so, I mean, we were Jewish. We were the only Jewish people in the neighborhood. And every single one of my friends went to church. And so if I spent the night on a Saturday, I'd go to church on Sunday. And I loved singing in church. And it was just so nice and relaxing. It was so much fun, you know. And my sister would go to church with friends too. And she would come home and she'd be like, please, do we have to be Jewish? Please, can we be Christian? Please. She would be like crying, please. You know, it's just like, you know, so anyway, there was a lot of like internal stuff that just naturally comes out in that, you know, that I sort of understand about the world that I'm creating. That is fiction. I wasn't in Baltimore. I wasn't that age. I wasn't, you know, none of that stuff is true, but it's almost like internally it's all coming from really a true place.
Yeah, there's definitely elements there, isn't there? Lisa, what's your question?
Well, I was going to say, was that in California?
Yeah, that was in Southern California. Yeah.
And the time for me, I'm a little bit younger than Mary Jane, but only by several, you know, a couple of years. But that time, mid-70s, was such a shift in how our country was going from one way to another.
Yeah.
And you capture that so well in the story, not just through Mary Jane's discovery, but just by the dichotomy of the two houses.
Yeah.
And the opening up with the coloring book scene is so perfect because there was that whole movement to, like, you know, be free, you know, the free to be yourself, and all of that was there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was free to be you and me. It was Marlon.
Free to be you and me. Yep.
You know, with Rosie Greer singing "It's All Right to Cry," you know, and then there was "Our Bodies Ourselves" coming out of Boston around that time. I don't know what year. Probably somebody watching knows what year, but I know it was sometime in the 70s, mid 70s. And then there was also this sort of jingoistic conservative. I mean, it was like everything was changing. And when you look at music, that's really where you see. I mean, you have Glenn Campbell, who I actually love, and you have Sly and the Family Stone, who I absolutely love. Like, you have all this, you know, and then you have the folk singers, and you have, you know, and you have Leonard Cohen, and you have Bob Dylan, and you have Joni Mitchell, and you still have Captain and Tennille, you know, sitting at the piano. And I mean, so it's like everything culturally, it was like this time of two worlds colliding.
Yeah. Yeah. You could go across the street and listen to Glenn Campbell and come to my house, and it would be Frank Zappa and Sly and the Family Stone. And then I would go, you know, to listen to Lawrence Welk at my grandparents. Right. And that was 75. So yeah, I think that just the way you captured it was wonderful.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Lawrence Welk. I mean, that's like a great one to mention. I mean, that was like, you know, and that was like the most bizarre, old-fashioned thing, but it was a huge show on TV, you know. And
every Sunday night.
Was that when it was on? Yeah.
Yeah.
With Kentucky. And you know, Mary Jane's family was watching, so.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like, as we're saying this, I'm thinking, I cannot believe I didn't put that in the book. Like, I'm just killing myself. Because it was just like, I mean, that's just such an interesting character. Like, in his strange, wasn't he always like, and a one, and a two? Like, he had some weird, like, Transylvanian accent or something. It was.
Yeah, he's sort of European North Dakotan. So,
is that what it was?
Yeah, you know, so it's like, you know, it's, you know, if you think about it, it's not that different from the cliched Minneapolis, the Minnesota accent, you know, but it's just a little further west. So.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
We're big North Dakota fans here. We're pretty close. So.
Nice.
So when you were doing the research for it, because you start talking about, you know, you wanted to know how things smelled, the wardrobe was, where did you turn to? I mean, I would think that would be just so much fun besides just memories.
Well, I mean, the good thing was that I actually lived in that neighborhood in Baltimore, and the neighborhood hadn't changed in 100 years. So the place and the stuff, you know, and cars. I mean, things like the record store. I went online and I just, typed in record stores, Baltimore in 1975. And it's like, wow, the most amazing record stores were coming up because there really weren't, I can't even think of, there really weren't any record stores when I lived there. And it was just like, and there were people, thank you. It's like, I'm so thankful for all these people who do these blogs and have these obsessions and they post things online. And it's like, somebody just posted about record stores in Baltimore and I could see pictures of them. And, so there's all this, stuff. And then I called people up who had lived there and grown up there and I ran stuff by them. Like when the Cones buy new dishes, I called somebody up and said, where would you have bought dishes in 1975? And she said, Smythe. I said, isn't that a jewelry store? And she said, yeah, but in 1975, you would have bought dishes there. And I thought, could she actually be right? And so I called Smythe and I said, did you sell dishes in 1975? And she said, let me get you the store historian. And I thought, store historian. So I talked to the store historian. She said, yes, in 1975, we were the dishes store for Baltimore. So it was just like things like that. I
have a question for you about that because I was obsessed with the record store and I thought you did a great job with that, Nigerian, but it's not. I think I heard that it's because I started trying to look for, actually have a friend who lives in Baltimore who loves music. And I'm like, where was Night Train? And he's like, I can't find it either. So you made that up.
I made up the name. There were all.
Why did you do it? Because there's so much real stuff in the store, in the book, but you decided to go with a conglomerate name, a mixed name.
Well, it was because
there must be a reason.
The picture I was seeing in my head of that record store wasn't on I wanted it to be on North Avenue where they go. Oh. And so the picture of that record store that I described wasn't on North Avenue. So I thought if I move that record store that I'm describing over to North Avenue, I got to change the name or I'm going to get people calling me saying.
Right. They'll go crazy. They'll go nuts.
Right. Yeah. So I just came up with a new name for it.
Because we had in Milwaukee, when I moved here many years ago, we had a store called Radio Doctors, which was exactly like that store. I mean, classical department, know-it-alls everywhere, really strong R&B and Black music, but also like rock, and bands would come in and play a song. My next door neighbor who worked for them in my apartment building left to work for Belinda Carlisle.
Oh, wow.
Like they just met at Radio Doctors when she was like supposed to be doing something or other. It's like, come with me and be my manager. So
that's great. Yeah.
I love all the detail in the book, and I love the Baltimore stuff. Everybody gets to see. I hope this goes well. I just want to say that they go to Hutzler's, I guess officially twice, and this is an actual Hutzler's department store bag, and there's a picture of the store that they would have shopped at.
Yeah.
That's something you probably wouldn't have expected from bookseller. But I also love that they go to Eddie's. And you've gone to Eddie's. It's still there.
Yeah. So Eddie's actually. So when I went to Baltimore to go to graduate school there, and before I went to graduate school there, all I knew were Ann Tyler's books, and I'd read them all and devoured them. And I loved Dinner at the Homesick Restaurant and The Accidental Tour. I mean, I just loved them all, and I loved her. It was like, how you just start loving an author when it was just like, I just thought, oh, I love this woman. And so then I moved to Baltimore. I had no idea. I didn't know where she lived. I didn't know anything about her. And I moved to Baltimore and I ended up in Roland Park, and I went to Eddie's. Eddie's is there unchanged in 100 years or whatever. And I was in Eddie's shopping, and there's a woman checking out in front of me, and she said, can I charge it to my account? And I'm thinking, wow, I'm in this city and you can charge stuff to an account. I'm thinking, this is amazing. This is so cool. And the woman said, of course, what's your name? And she said her name, and it was Ann Tyler. And I just thought, so of course, when I double take to see everything she's buying, I was like, oh, okay, because I want to, like, what does she eat? And like, and I'm look at her face and I thought, oh, it's her. There she is shopping at Eddie's, and her characters shop at Eddie's in her book.
They do. Yeah. I'm going to tell you, I've read every Ann Tyler novel except for Noah's Compass. I'm saving that. But I'm completely obsessed and love her so much. And she never tours. So the idea that you saw her in a grocery store, you don't understand how important that is. That is almost as amazing as a friend of mine saw Anita Bruckner shopping at the Waitrose in London before she died.
I was
buying
just
tuna
I went to Waitrose every day. I loved Waitrose.
Oh,
I was like, hey,
nice
store. I love it. I was there. No, it was an amazing moment, like just seeing her. And then of course she walked away, and I said, can I open an account? I thought, she has an account, I want an account, and she's here. I mean, so Eddie's was, it was like that. And then her characters, a lot of them are in Roland Park.
Right, of course. That's what I know.
In Accidental Tourist, I actually put Mary Jane's house on the street of the house. I don't think do they say the name of the street in the book? I don't think they say the name of the street in the book. They just say, but
that's a beyond it. Yeah.
In the movie, The Accidental Tourist, they filmed it in Roland Park, and the house that they used in the movie is the street where I put Mary Jane's house. So there's a bit of an ode to Ann Tyler here, because I just love her so much and all her books, and I just,
Before Lisa says something, I just want to say one thing about Eddie's that I think is really cool. You mentioned that Jews weren't allowed in Roland Park until the mid-70s, and Eddie's, I think, was owned by a Jewish family. It's owned by the Cohns.
Yeah, I think so, probably. Yeah. No, I mean, I guess. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
I mean, I don't know, but they're the Cohns, and so is your characters, and Cohns of the Cohen tribe.
Yeah,
so
no, they were there. Well, it's funny because I'm getting a lot of letters from this book, and one letter I got was just, I mean, it was amazing. I had to forward it to, Eliza, who you all know, and editor and public. But she said, I'm Mary Jane's age. I grew up in Roland Park. We were one of two Jewish families in 1975. So I guess there were two families there in 1975. And she said, and my father was a psychiatrist. And, and she just wrote me this really long letter talking about her life. And it was just such an amazing letter. It was great. So
that is amazing.
Yeah.
And I was gonna say, this is what the second time Ann Tyler's come up in our conversations. There was another author that talked about Ann Tyler being influenced.
Catherine Heine.
It was Catherine Heine. Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, then later on, I was at a little cocktail party. Maybe there were 12 people there. It was something, and I didn't really know anyone. I'm just walking around talking to people, and I start talking to this, nice older, and I get nervous at parties. I get sort of social anxiety, so I'm always slightly anxious, and you can't quite see people when you're anxious. And I start talking to this woman, and then I look up and I realize I'm talking to Ann Tyler, and it's like I realized it. I mean, not mid-conversation, but like 5 sentences in, you know what I mean? It was just like a little, and then I thought, oh, do I say something? Do I not say something? Because I was so starstruck. I mean, she really, I do find her amazing, but I didn't say anything. I thought, I'm going to be cool. I'm just going to be cool,
Wow. And I want to, when you were growing up, were there record stores that you remember going to specifically? The whole role of music and the record stores, is so important to this. So I think, talk about your experiences and not just your website.
Yeah. So, I mean, no, it's interesting. So when I was growing up, I don't know. I mean, my mother loved music, and she's got this beautiful singing voice. And none of my friends had a turntable or speakers in their living room. And we had a turntable and speakers in the living room. We also had floor to ceiling bookshelves, wall to wall bookshelves. It was just, it was like books and music. And my mother would buy records. And so the records and the music I knew was the stuff she would bring home, but she would bring home great stuff, the band and Rolling Stones and Elton. So all of my music came to me through my mother, who just loved music and listened to music. And there was nobody ever said, turn it down or don't put it, we'd come home from school. I'd come home with a bunch of friends and we'd put a record on and we'd just crank it up and we'd dance and sing in the living room. And nobody ever said, turn that off. Or
you grew up, you're Dr. Cohen's kid.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yes. So I never bought a record, and I'm sure there must have been a record store that my mother went to, but I wasn't, she was bringing them home, and I was just, Bonnie Raitt, John Prine. I mean, she had what I consider good taste, but I guess it was sort of taste that was injected into me through her. So who knows if it's good taste, bad taste, but it was what I was exposed to really early on.
Well, Lisa, my dad was pure elevator music. That's
Oh
what.
no,
That's
my parents were big, and we had the stereo in the living room, and we had our own record player in our room, and we played. My dad gave us his old 45s, and we would spend hours listening to his old 45s. There was just music all the time in the house, and it's always been that way.
What 45s were they? What kind of music was it?
He listened to all kinds of stuff. So it was a lot of just some of the more pop stuff from the early 60s. And then with the albums, it was the band, and he was a big Dylan fan.
Yeah.
And it would go, and it would be listening to Bing Crosby at Christmas. It was a whole range of stuff. John Prine,
Yeah.
all over the place.
Okay, your parents, your cousins.
I know. And
The same people. This is crazy.
It really is interesting that way, because it was that turning point, because it was very different than what my grandparents were like. And I could feel that divide, and to have that in a novel. But when you go to other people's houses, I think you really do open up into a whole different world of seeing things. And that's an interesting part of this book. Just those little bit of exposures can change the way you view something.
Right. Yeah. That's sort of what growing up is, right? It's like you're a kid and you're like, oh, this is music, this is food, this is dinner, this is bath time, this is a house. And then it's like the farther you get from that physically, you go down the street, you go to the neighbors, you go, the more you're like, oh, wait, this is music, this is dinner, this is, if you just look at I loved opening people's refrigerators. Our refrigerator was like the Cohn's refrigerator. So like, my sister used to pay me to smell my mother's cheese because it was the stinkiest cheese ever. And she'd be like, I'll pay you $1 if you smell mom's cheese. So first you had to find the cheese. It's just like balls of tinfoil and little bags, and everything's rotten and black and good, so you're like opening stuff, trying to find this stinky cheese. It was Limburger cheese that she loved, and then you go to I know, isn't that the most horrible cheese?
In Wisconsin, you get every smell of cheese, so nothing's too surprising for us.
That'd be a good book title, Every Smell of Cheese. I like that. That's a great line. Or a good album name, Every Smell of Cheese. So I just loved going in other people's refrigerators and be like, lunch meat in a nice little tidy packet and orange soda. It was just like, so a part of growing up is sort of entering other homes and realizing that everything, music and food are two things that really change your world.
Yeah, it was the neighbor's butter that I would open the fridge and get little bits of butter, and then the grits.
Oh, grits. I love
grits. I would just beg to have grits.
Oh.
Daniel, what did you discover from neighbors?
We
food-wise
didn't have grits, but I don't, it's funny. I think a lot. I was at a lot of different neighbors' houses, and I can't really remember what I coveted, or what kind of food that would come out. Like you'd want to go to, say, Barry's house or Alan's house because you might get such and such. But I was thinking, my sister, in addition to my friend Michael, who investigated the Baltimore records for me, my sister Meryl's on, who had a really great 45 collection, which I destroyed pretty much. But she had very good taste, and I feel like that helped me memorize many artists, and also led me into the first year I used to chart every song that I liked. I'd make like a little billboard for myself, and I'd go 1 to 40 every week. And I started in 1975. So I also had the Billboard Top 40 memorized, and I went to tennis camp, and my instructor thought it was so amusing that he'd bring me up to people and say, what was the progression for Love Will Keep Us Together? And I'd go 33, 25, 11, 9, 8, 2.
Really?
It disappeared after that. There's only so many number progressions.
Yeah. Wait, so what was your number one song for 19?
Of 75?
Your favorite song?
I had a very mixed up taste. So I would I was looking at because one of the things, you have this really fun playlist on Spotify, but I would go, I really know it's like, well, this is interesting. These songs aren't all from 1975. The Shining Star certainly is. That's the number one song from 75, but you have a nice one.
None of them.
What? None, right, some before. Right, yeah. Because you buy the records and you still have them.
Yeah.
Or you play them out so much, but I was like, oh, Isley Brothers. Well, I think, I thought Fight the Power is the 75 song. So I was looking, I was saying, well, oh, Cat Stevens, I'd probably play Elle very young, because that sort of reminds me of Mary Jane in her Innocence Lost. And,
Oh,
but
I would love if you would make a playlist, a Mary playlist, because I would love to hear your 75.
well, I haven't seen them lately, but I used to watch the Large-Hearted Boy playlist. Do you remember those?
I did a thing with him. He's so great. I love that dog. He's so great.
Yeah, he's really terrific. I love yours too, but I have to say, I was going like, oh, so I would like I'm so embarrassed about this, but I really loved the first Barry Manilow album. And I was like, oh, people shouldn't even know. And then of course and now people are like, oh, Barry Manilow, whatever. But then it was like, but I also liked a lot of 70s R&B and very pop music and some rock, I was a soft-hearted person. I liked the female singer, even then.
I saw he was in that giant, that concert about a month and a half ago in Central Park.
And really?
Barry was there, and I saw him. He was great,
Oh, it's a little too. It got to be too much for me, and I feel like, and I'm not really a groupie. I went to see. I really loved when I was young. I would go to a lot of concerts, so I was a very James Taylor, Carly Simon, Linda Ronstadt kind of thing.
Oh, lots of Linda Ronstadt in our house.
Well, yeah, that's practically your neighbor.
Yes.
Ronstadt. No, I love Linda. The album where she's in the roller skates and the shorts. It's like,
I was very obsessed when she would sing Carla. For some reason, I really loved Carla Bonoff, which was one of her songwriters who eventually had a minor hit, but didn't really, like all these people who would not quite break out the way, and I'd be gunning for them, but.
No, but Carly and James, I just loved so much. I mean.
Oh, I think I cried when I heard they got divorced.
Oh, yeah. And Mockingbird, their Mockingbird together is like one of my favorite songs.
When I was in high school, I hung out with a bunch of, I hung out with a bunch of girls, and we were next door to a community college, and James Taylor's brother, Livingston, was playing the concert in the community college, and we went to it, and we were the only people there.
No, wow.
So it turned out there were two shows, and they forgot to promote one of them. So.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't.
So that was the closest. Otherwise, it was Nassau Coliseum, 700 rows back.
Oh, wow. And then John Denver. We forgot about John Denver.
John Denver, 1975 was a very big year for John Denver. It was maybe not as quality-wise as good as 74. There's some people don't love Thank God I'm a Country Boy for some reason, but I liked it when I was 14.
We sang it.
I could sing it word for word right now.
I'll start.
We would belt it out.
Yeah,
I think I can sing songs, and then I realize I'm going,
no, you can sing that one.
And Delta Dawn, Helen Reddy's Delta Dawn. My sister and I sang that all the time.
Oh, that was so great. And I'm Not Lisa. Remember that one?
Yeah.
That is, yes, Jessie Coulter, Waylon Jennings' wife.
Yeah. Really? Was Waylon Jennings' wife?
I didn't know that.
It was. And I'm going to tell you, I believe it hit #4 on Billboard.
So great.
Whereas Waylon Jennings never had a top 20 on the pop charts.
Because
they would separate out.
They would send him to country.
They would send him to, and now everything's mushed together. But back then you had to actually, to hit a chart, you had to be serviced to that genre.
Please make a playlist. Like, I can just tell that whatever you make will bring me so much joy.
And you have to like post it with one of your, do you have your sheets still?
Sure.
You have to share those.
Wow. That would be, that's a book, a kid who does that. That's a novel. And then what's your title you came up with?
Every Smell of Cheese.
Every Smell of Cheese. I don't
know if it works for that particular novel, but maybe.
It works.
That's a little cheesy. Hey, I wanted to talk a little about, because I've been, as I said, I loved Mary Jane so much that I'm reading The Wonder Bread
Summer.
Wonder Bread Summer. And there are, it's a different book. It's set in California, but there are some similarities. And I'm always interested in authors' through lines, because once Allie in that book is another innocent. I mean, she's not quite as innocent as Mary Jane, but she's another innocent who is exposed to sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and has to sort of figure out how to adapt into it. And I heard that people have called it sort of a play on Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah. Well,
So
that, yeah.
do you think it is?
Well, that wasn't deliberate. I think it was my agent who was like, "You've got like an Alice in Wonder thing here." She falls down the, she called the alley, you know, there's the cocaine, the white rabbit, and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, so that was like, it must have been very subconscious.
So I'm guessing you don't know this either. Do you think that there's any sort of, you're playing off of any story for Mary Jane? Because Lisa and I were talking about it and we think you are. Do you have any idea? Do you feel?
Gosh, no. Well, oh, I'm so curious. You mean so like a historic, like a child
classic story. Yeah.
classic children's
Okay.
story?
I propose that this is a play on Snow White. And she is with the dwarves because they are the unruly bunch that, like, she's an innocent who grows up in it, but she also tames them. Like she does the way she does the housework and cooks for them.
She does clean and cook and clean. You're right. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's really good. I hadn't thought of that. And
when he said that to me, I was like, absolutely. That's it. That's exactly that's what felt so familiar.
Right.
It's true. Yeah.
Well, Lisa did say, but who's the evil queen?
I mean, her mother like softens in the end and changes, but maybe her father is the evil queen.
We have another idea.
What was that? Oh, Beanie Jones.
Beanie.
Right. Beanie Jones, Beanie Jones.
Beanie Jones, Beanie Jones.
Right. First she whispers, then she moans. Right. That's so good. Wow.
That must have been fun coming up with all the ditties that they would. I mean, that's just.
Well,
that was a fun part.
Do that, and I didn't realize. I mean, it's something that I maybe everybody does do it, but it's something I didn't think about until I was writing the book because my kid, like, so a lot of those songs were actual songs that my kids and I had made up together in the car and had sung, and you know, so it was sort of taken from life, the just kind of singing about anything.
One of the people, so we want, I don't know, there's a lot of speculation, speaking of real things and about who the celebrities are supposed to be. Is that speculation from you, or is that other people as to who the people in the story are supposed to be?
I was just thinking, I mean, for me, they were just created of the time. I mean, when I was writing the book, I read Keith Richards' memoir, which I love. You both have probably read it, but
I haven't read it, but I heard from a lot of customers that it was like the best rock and roll memoir.
Yeah.
It was really good. And it was really interesting because he really goes into his internal life a bit. And so when I was reading it, I sort of took the ideas about what it feels like to be a heroin addict and what it feels like to love to play guitar and sort of his and celebrity and how he feels about it. So I sort of took Keith Richards' internal life, but you know, Keith Richards is from England. You know, I wanted it to be a really like good old Southern guy, you know, just a great guy who loves everybody, who's from the South, who plays guitar. And so it's sort of, you know, it's just a creation, but a lot of Keith Richards' internal life is within him. Because
it comes up all the time that everybody thinks it's Greg Allman and Cher. So
right, well, you kind of can't help that, right? When you just have when you have a blonde, you know, and then the woman, I mean, I was thinking of everybody then. I mean, like Captain and Tennille and Tony Tennille and Cher, but I was also really thinking of the power of being a person who goes by one name. Like, you have to be so immensely powerful to go by a single name. You know, Beyonce, who is it now? Beyonce and J-Lo, and you know, it's like
there's been a lot in the music world. It's pretty, well, Madonna, but you know, there's it's a little more common. Monica, Brandy, you know, there's who did a duet together. Yeah, it seems, but it is something. It is transcendent. I suppose there's a whole bunch of one-name people. We know them. You know, on the pop charts, they're one name now, but they're no name later.
Yeah. Right, but there's like in the 70s, there's like this power. Like I wanted Sheba to have like all the power of celebrity, but to just genuinely be this person with this complicated family life, and sort of have this star power where the world sees her one way, but she is someone different. Whereas Jimmy's kind of, who he is as a celebrity is who he is at home. He's kind of just there, whereas Sheba has a persona that is out there publicly. So it was really just kind of, and in the 70s, the two things almost didn't meet. It's like now, you see the public person and then you read everything about them, and and you know too much. Whereas the 70s is you don't know enough. And it's like you'd have to be in Mary Jane's situation to see sort of the other side.
And I like that she came from that tradition of the whole family doing the show together, and how that was such a big thing, all the way up until about the 70s. I mean, maybe the mid 80s, we didn't have the whole family, that family entertainment that way.
Yeah. I mean, I was also thinking because all those family shows, you wonder what was going on behind the scenes, like what was going on. I mean, the Carpenters, like we forgot to mention them in the music. I mean, they had some great songs, but it's like, poor Karen Carpenter. I mean, she died of anorexia. Like there's clearly trauma and dysfunction, something is going on behind it. And yet there they were out on stage, and the Osmond family, and the Jackson 5, and the Sonny and Cher show, and Captain and Tennille. Didn't Captain and Tennille have a variety show?
They did. And the Cowsills, which were the basis for the Partridge Family.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And even all the way back to the Carters.
Oh, right. Was that the sisters? Like June?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And you get those sister. Well, and then I mean, there's that Saturday Night Live skit where they're sort of mocking Lawrence Welk, and the sisters come on and they all sing.
Yes, I love that.
And Kristen Wiig has this funny little hand,
and the high forehead.
The really high forehead.
I watched those episodes. I watched that. For some reason, I just watch it over and over and over again. I've watched every single one of those like 20 times. And completely mesmerized of. I mean, I think it was the Lennon sisters and also the King sisters.
Real life.
Yeah, the Lennon sisters were the ones I think on the Lawrence Welk show, but they didn't have a disfigured body. But the King, do you remember those King family specials where it was like 50 of them? There was the kids, the King family, the King boys, and the King sisters, and the King kids. They would be on off network. They were off network specials. You can look them up. And one of them showed up on My Three Sons. One of the kids showed up as the wife of the, not the eldest son, because he disappeared, but the middle son, who then became the eldest son after the super eldest son. This is important.
My Three Sons, all I remember is the opening, that foot.
Yes.
And like I can figure,
It's very disturbing. But the other two of the brothers were brothers in real life too. So imagine their complications.
Right. Yes. And so so I mean, with Sheba, I really was just thinking of the time, the place, what people saw, and what was going on behind the scenes.
And you get the clothes and the fabrics and all of that. And it just, it's the subtlety of adding the textures that were so important to that time period. Well, I guess they are to everything, but it really added to the story, the discovery for Mary Jane.
Clothes were great. I mean, and like we were saying, the merging of times. I mean, like the clothes, you did have like, the shift dress and the head, but think of like, well, I have Jackie Kennedy, I guess, where she was in her 60s or something, but you did have that stuff. And then you did have bralettes and bell bottoms. And I mean, we used to sew halter tops. We'd take a piece of fabric, and we'd cut it in like this sort of, what's that shape? Four sides, uneven.
Trapezoid?
Trapezoid, yes.
And then you would,
right. And then you just sew hem, and you have a thing, and we'd sit around and sew, halter tops. And, so the clothes definitely, the whole thing was, I don't want to say high low, because one's not better than the other, but it was this really things coming at each other, like two trains hitting head on.
Well, you look at the evolution of Carol Brady on the Brady Bunch, like how her hairstyles over the season.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Really reflect the times. Bonnie wrote, was the name Mary Jane a play on words for pot? I'm just going to say yes.
Are we not a person? I actually love the name Mary Jane so much. I just think it's such a great name. And the pot came to me later. So she was Mary Jane before I thought too much about pot.
She was one of my retired booksellers who reads a lot, who's still involved, very involved. Her name's Jane Mary. So
and she goes by Jane Mary.
no, she goes by Jane.
Oh, okay.
Except that her mother probably called her Jane Mary. You know the way moms can do that.
Yeah. Now I'm looking at dogs right now, and I'm thinking, oh, can I name it Mary? I can't name it after my own book, so I think I'm gonna name. I want to name her Mary Tyler Moore. I thought that would be a good name.
Oh, that's a good, yeah.
Yeah, but I just love the name Mary Jane. I love the name Mary. I love the name Jane. I like them together, but of course I had to throw the pot in there.
Somebody was singing Mandy to us.
Yeah.
Born to Run. Someone was singing Born to Run. And Christy Clancy, who we love,
Hey,
loved
Christy.
Izzy's character.
I love,
And
let's talk about Izzy.
let's talk about Izzy.
Yeah, she was such a child that I don't think Mary Jane probably was allowed to be.
Yeah,
As a 5-year-old. And what was sort of the inspiration for that, besides Dr. Spock?
Yeah, I have 2 daughters, and so she's sort of a mix of my 2 daughters, and I have a really adorable niece. But my one daughter, every compound word she mixed up. So like Izzy says Mary Rose for Rosemary. And I had this daughter, it was like, she's left-handed, but it was like paper towels were towel paper, toilet paper was paper toilet, a seat belt was a belt seat. I mean, you gave her any compound, it didn't matter how many times you said it, she just reversed them. So it was just like, she was a little, and then I had another daughter who she just would hang out with the grownups, and she just could really hang with the adults the way. So she's kind of a mix of that, and my niece who's also, so I just took these kids that I love and created this new kid.
Franken kid.
Yeah.
The Franken kid.
And for me, it's like, I always, from the time I was a little kid, all I wanted was to be a mother. I always wanted to have a kid. I always loved babysitting. And when I had kids, I remember thinking, this is more fun than dolls and babysitting put together. Like, this is the greatest thing ever. Like, I couldn't believe how much fun it was, or is to have kids and daughters. So I think that hopefully, I don't know if that, but that sort of joy and just how great, kids are kind of comes across in Mary Jane. I also am a organizational, alphabetize the bookshelf freak. So I can't cook though. So
well, that's
people.
it was so the food that Mary Jane was preparing too, and just kind of pulling everybody in, and how following that gave her that freedom and the way she was able to structure the time there, but also gave her that structure to discover who she was or could be.
Yeah.
I thought, yeah.
Do you make a good bird in the nest?
I know, it's truly, I can make a grilled cheese sandwich and a quesadilla. It's like, that's pretty much, oatmeal. Like, I really don't cook. Like, I had to call, I have a friend who went to cooking school in France, and she's a food stylist. I was like, how do you make because I think they have a meatloaf. How do you make a meatloaf? And she told me, like, what are the ingredients? And I was Googling, like, I can't make anything. Like, I'm just not, but I did want, I really wanted, I didn't want that stuff to be rejected. Like, I thought these are a good thing, people who can cook. I admire people who can cook and people who can clean, and I like to organize, so there was this, even though I didn't want one house to be all bad and one house to be all good. I wanted, it's like, these they all everything has value, or not everything, but a lot of the stuff that she brought from her home had value in the new home.
And it was at a time too where women were sort of pushing back to against those traditional roles. So it was nice to see that balance, or to be able to see Mary Jane take it.
Yeah. My mother sat my sister and I down. I think I was 8. I think I was 8 and my sister was 11 and my brother was 5, or maybe I was 7 or whatever. And I think I was 7. And she was, she was smoking cigarettes. She used to smoke cigarettes, and she walked in the house. And I remember my sister and I were playing Parcheesi, and she walked in. She said, "Hey, girls." And we said, "Yeah." And she said, "I quit." And I was looking at her. I said, "You quit smoking?" And she said, "No, I quit." I said, "Would you quit what?" And she said, "I quit being a housewife." And I remember saying, "You can do that?" And she said, "Yeah, I quit." And we said, "So what is it? So you're not going to be?" She said, "No, I quit." And so then she took us on a tour around the house. She said, "Here's the washer and dryer, and here's how you wash clothes, and here's what you do, here's the vacuum, and here's a mop, and here are lunch bags, and here's food." And I quit. And, it was like sort of, it was like people were like, I have, nobody's going to tell me who I have to be. So there was this kind of revolution happening there. I mean, I didn't know any other mother who quit, but
Did your mother quit permanently?
Yeah, she quit permanently. And that's why the house got so extraordinarily messy. It was messier than the Cones though, because my brother had this bird that somehow it was decided, I don't know who, my brother, that it wasn't going to live in the cage. And so the bird lived on this wrought iron curtain rod in the family room that was over a couch. And it would just drop, there were bird droppings all over this couch in the family room. And they would like harden into this like white crust on the couch. I mean, it was just chaos. But it was because my mother quit. So I'm
well, the good news is you have more inspiration for even more books in you.
What's that? Yes.
I love that.
Your friend David's singing Little Feet now.
Oh,
I love Little Feet. No, I mean, you just, it's like whatever, you grow up and it's like you realize everybody did the best they could at the time with and it's like,
we always like to ask talk about some books that you like.
Oh, I like everything. So so I'm usually reading 2 books at once, like, because I have one electronically, because at nighttime, I don't want to have to reach over and turn off the light. I like to just fall asleep and drop it. So at nighttime right now, I'm reading Imposter Syndrome, which is great. Have you read that one yet? Oh, it's really good. I mean, it's like a Russian spy in the Silicon Valley. And then the daytime I'm reading a memoir that I picked up in London. I was in London last month. It's right over here. Gonna grab it. But I don't know if it's available in the States. So I'm reading this. It's this English comedian who's hilarious. But I just finished this. Did you read this?
No.
I didn't. I read her first book, a good Los Angeles novel.
Yeah. Frank with Me. I really liked that. Did you like that one?
I really like Be Frank with Me.
Yeah, so I'm reading that, so I'm just like, I mean, I've got, if I turn the camera, you see a pile of books, but I usually have 2 going, and if I don't love it by like page 30, I just think I could die tomorrow. I'm not going to sit here and read a book I don't want to read.
You're like a bookseller.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a page 30? Well, like, what's your page limit? Where's the page where you stop and just think I'm doing something else now?
Anywhere between 30 and 50,
I'm
usually,
about 50.
Yeah. Because if it doesn't come together, and the thing too with books is a lot of times it's just the wrong time.
Oh, absolutely. There are books that started and then it's like, I can't do this. And somebody's like, oh, you have to read it. And then I'll go back to it and I can read it at that time.
And it's a really good book at a different time. Yeah. It's, book selling is hard that way because you can really love something and the other person may not be ready for it. So,
yeah. Oh, and I just read The Galley of, do I have it here? William, Elizabeth Strout.
Oh, sure.
Oh.
Did you read it yet? Did you
No, not yet.
I haven't. I've read both Lucy Barton novels, and I really love Anything is Possible. Is that the last one?
Yeah.
I really love it.
She's amazing. I'm just thinking, who is this woman? I mean, she's sort of an Ann Tyler to me, like in that she seems like smarter, better, more brilliant. And it's like she's like this. I'm thinking, who is she? I mean, I don't know when it comes out. Does it come out in November?
Any second.
Yes, I read that, and it was really amazing. It was a very great book. So it's.
Any of your friends have books that you'd like to plug?
Oh, they all have books.
Mention one.
My friend James Magruder, who actually, speaking of Belinda Carlisle, he wrote the musical for the Go-Go's.
Oh.
Head Over Heels. It was a great musical. Did you see it in New York?
Mm-mm.
It was a musical. That was set to the music of the Go-Go's. It was just fabulous. It was hysterical. He has a new book out called. Anyway, James Magruder. I can't remember the name of it, but I just grabbed it. I just read like 2 pages, and was starting it this morning. I can't think of anyone right now, but it's like
That's okay. I'll figure out this.
Yeah. There's so many good books out. There's so many great writers in the world. It's like, I mean, that's why I just won't do the past page 30 thing. It's like there's too many great books to.
And Jane Wyman is from out here.
Jane Wyman.
In Lake Country, from the Go-Go's.
Oh you're kidding.
Her cousin's a good friend of mine.
Oh, neat. Yeah.
So we've got the Go-Go's going on in Wisconsin already.
Yeah. No, there have been so many good books out lately. I mean, I feel like I
Yeah.
haven't had a problem. Like I haven't stopped at anything lately. I feel like I've just been, rushing through, I mean, the people who blurb Mary Jane, I picked, it was like writers I love, like Nick Hornby but like Kevin Wilson, what was his last book that was so great with the kids who light on fire? Nothing to see here.
Nothing to see here. Yeah.
I love that. And Marcy Dermansky's last book, can't remember, it's too much, So I mean, yeah, too much pressure to come up with these titles.
I like the Kevin Wilson too. So
yeah, he's great.
Well, last question, Lisa.
Last question.
We're at an hour.
We are at an hour. Let me
it.
see if I've missed anything on my list. Was there a point? Well, there was one thing I was going to ask. Was there anything that was left out that you were kind of sad to see go?
You mean that I wrote and got edited out?
That's a whole longer conversation. That's not a last question conversation.
Really, but I was hired to write. I mean, the 3,000 pictures that Sony bought optioned the book for a movie, and I was hired to write the screenplay. So I'm working on the screenplay now.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So when you ask about leaving things out, it's like you take, I don't know how many pages this book is, 320, 330, whatever it is, and you have to turn it into 100-page or 100, screenplay. It's like, there's a lot I have to leave out. And so the writing the screenplay is also the process of, what do I see as just the center stuff that you absolutely can't let go of. And so this has been an interesting, I'm on the second draft because I write and I write fast a lot, and then I rewrite. So
that would be an interesting process. And this would because so much of what you write is visual and visceral. So it can be demonstrated in a movie so well.
But then there's difficult stuff. Like I don't want to give away too much, but there's a sex addict element to it. And how do I show that? Because it's all thought. So there's the idea of how do you show thought? Like I don't want to do a voiceover. How do you show thought? Because it is a first person narration and there is thought. Yeah. There's a lot of I thought this and I think this and I feel this and
So no Waltons for you then. So. You're David asked as you're thinking visually, who did you see Mary Jane as? Who would you cast?
Who would I cast? I mean, Mary Jane's hard because she's 14 and I can't think of.
That person probably is 8 now.
Right. Yeah, right. Or 12 or, I mean, it's like, it's just, and I don't even know who these young, but like people on Twitter or people send me notes about the movie and I've gotten a lot of notes that said Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga for Jimmy and Sheba, or stuff like, or I was walking down, I came out of Nordstrom's the other day and I'm on the Upper West Side. And I was walking down the street and Jessica Chastain was walking towards me and she was with her husband. He's pushing a baby and she's walking towards me. And I thought, it's Bonnie Cohn, the red hair. And she's beautiful. I thought, it's Bonnie, and I'm just staring at her thinking, believe me, I'm staring at you, and she's so beautiful. And I just thought, she'd be a perfect Bonnie Cohn. Like
you should have some copies of your books to hand out since you're in New York. Just hand out to the right actor and actress. Here, a gift from me. We want to thank Jessica Anya Blau for a wonderful hour. We're thrilled to have her, and we're looking forward to selling your book over the holiday season.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate everything you do and everything you do for writers and for books, and it's amazing. Thank you both so much. And I really want that playlist.
Work on it.
Thank you. So should I just click out? Is that?
You just get to, you wave and we'll go.
We wave and we say goodbye.
Wave,
and then we're
bye.
done.